Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 20. I'm the Devon Rain Man in Ufa.
And I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
And I'm Tom Kenny in St. Petersburg.
We are delighted to have Tom as our special guest for this, our ultimate episode in Season 3. And we will be discussing one of the best films, in my opinion, of the last couple of years, All My Friends Hate Me. So, selfishly, I'm just happy to be discussing the film with two great minds and who offer different perspectives. Tom being himself a Devonian, which we'll get into a little bit later, and Mark, who just always has a good take. So excited to hear what you guys thought about the movie. And viewer, maybe you can chime in later with your own interpretation.
Well, I just want to point out that it's not an adaptation of my autobiography.
Thank you. The date is July 17th, allegedly, and I was in London. BFI is a really cool place to watch films. It was originally recommended to me by another friend of the show, Joe Greenwood. And they show, I wouldn't say art house films, I would just say good films. So British Film Institute, which actually is one of the financial sponsors of the film. And I saw it in one of their smaller cinemas, so probably seated around 30 people. And wow, the horror aspect of the film really moved me to the point where I was just speechless afterwards. And I just was so overwhelmed and almost to the point where I was worried about, like, am I going to get over this feeling? Of course I
Tom,
did with some walking.
Question about the screening. Sorry to interrupt.
Not at all.
I was really curious about the reception of the comedy. Was it received comedically, or were people just horrified?
I remember laughter, sure. So, and I remember people eavesdropping in on people's conversations afterwards. And I think it was quite strong for one person. So that was kind of amusing for me when you see like a film kind of, just hitting someone pretty hard.
But that's a fine line, isn't it? When does comedy overwhelm? When does the horror aspect overwhelm the comedy? It's a very fine line to tread.
And it's a delicious couple of elements to put together as well. Like, I think the whole black comedy, dark comedy genre is my favorite in some way. Or at least I'm in the phase right now where that's kind of what I'm keen on. Let's go to the next slide. And Mark has chosen to start with the setting of the film. So, Mark, why don't you say a couple words and then we'll pass over to Tom.
This is for the non-Brits in the audience, who, of course, are all ignorant of the geography here. But I'm looking at the map. That's the Devonshire flag, by the way, according to Wikipedia, which I think is a nice touch. But if you look at the map, the part in red would be Devon, and it looks like it's east of Cornwall and directly south of Wales. Do I have that right?
Yep.
So as a native, what can you tell us about the place? And maybe, like, because your perspective is much valued, what can you tell us about the place and maybe how it's depicted in the film? And, like, do you think it's an accurate depiction, or was there something they missed, or something that offended you, or something that made you proud as a native son?
Well, I mean, let's start with the context of the film then, because there are, of course, substrata of society in Devon. My experience, personally, I come from a market town called Tiverton, is obviously a market trading center. Population about 25, 30,000, something like that. And my personal view was that Devon is mostly fairly deprived and poor, with a distinct substrata of very wealthy gentry. And I think that was what was displayed most prominently in the film, the kind of higher upper class lifestyle there, which definitely exists. You know, there's a class of people wearing barbers and tweed suits, and like just past my house every Sunday of my life when I was growing up, the fox hunt would come past, and there would be blaring horns and hundreds of what are they called? What are those called? Beagles. Yeah, and just a bunch of gentlemen, and then a bunch of sycophantic hangers-on, you know, regular peasants like me who just followed around behind watching.
I believe the term is pezzo.
Pezzo, yeah.
I'm fucking with you, but we'll get into that.
Actually, on the way to South Molton from Tiverton, which is another market town, there's a uniquely Devonshire sign. It's a road sign that says "Beware pheasants crossing," because the road bisected a large farm, which was used as a hunt as well. And somebody just painted over the H, so it said "Beware peasants crossing." Yeah.
Focused on. Go on.
No, I mean it's a beautiful place, and I think it's a wonderful place to grow up as well. I think you can still have a real life growing up there. It's not in the home counties, so it's not, you know, it's not overly gentrified or overly posh. It's still quite typical, classically English, you know. Yeah.
Well, and of course, Mark,
you've mentioned
that's where my family is.
Where?
In Devon as well. Like, that's where my.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
okay.
Okay. I've been to Tiverton, where Tom Harold's from, and it's Exeter, you know, where I spent my summers for the last 10 years.
Okay. Yeah. Where you were accosted by those young people who took offense to your Nikes.
Yes, yeah, and Exeter's actually, Exeter, I would say, is the ground zero of this gentrification thing, because on the one hand, property prices have exploded in Exeter, and it's a really cool, really cultural, really artistic happening place. And on the other hand, it has a wildly worsening problem with homelessness and young homelessness, which you can't deny, Tom. You know, there's Sidwell Street now, and you know the upper places like that, almost no-go zones.
Yeah,
you know, there's just such terrible problems like that, and homeless encampments. So, yeah, you can see it very clearly there. Yeah.
So is this Guy Bethel's place of origin? Is that what you're saying?
Essentially, because Taunton is Devon, right?
Clumpton.
Taunton.
Oh, Taunton. Yeah.
So that's where my dad went to school, and our granny, she lives in Lympston, which is...
Wait. Isn't Taunton Somerset?
It may be, actually, yeah.
Just in Somerset. Yeah, but I mean, it's basically the same area. No.
But my auntie Judy is also a friend of the show. She lives in Cullamstock, which is definitely Devon. Lympston is in Devon, where my granny lives. And Robert, also a friend of the show, is from Clumpton, so another Devonian.
Shout out to AJ.
Yes.
All right, so I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt, like 2 key words have already been mentioned. Posh and Pez, right? And so that's the dichotomy that, to some extent, that to me, that's not the focus of the film. It's more the interpersonal relationships, but, you know, that is an aspect of the interpersonal relationships, I guess.
It's a driving force for that antagonism, because it seems like he's trying to almost transition out of that.
Yeah, I think it's fundamental. It's so central, but I want us to tackle that a little bit later, if that's okay, because we're going to have direct prompts. And also, I found it interesting, Tom, that you focused on the gentry, because if we think about this, the most explicitly Devon characters, I mean, I guess you could say the host, I'm blanking on his name right now. It'll come up in a second. But
George.
Norman, George, Norman, and Archie. No, not Archie. Sorry. Who's the and Harry, right?
Harry.
Well, either way, so Norman and Harry, they're not gentry, and they are like they kind of embody Devon in the film, right? In terms of their accent and I don't know.
Yeah, but the way that they're portrayed, it almost means it's almost as if they're more dangerous
Right.
for being real, as if this whole posh bubble is about to burst, you know.
Yeah. So let's get into that. Let's keep going with the slides.
We've got a message in the chat. Looks like it's from Steve. Can you see it, or is it only on my screen?
I don't have my YouTube
Wait.
open, so
Okay, so it says, "Blimey, Mark Will and company are podcasting machines." Gonna watch the opening of this, but not all yet, as I don't think I've seen this film. And he laughed at my comment, which no one else found humorous. It's not an adaptation of my autobiography, so
yes.
thanks for noticing. At least someone did.
I gave you a polite snigger.
Okay. I'm going to this is cool, by the way. I like this Todos me odian Spanish title.
Why isn't it Todos mis amigos me odian?
Editorial choice.
Yeah, everybody, not just all my friends, but everybody hates me.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, give us the synopsis.
Okay, so brief synopsis for us. Our protagonist Pete joins his friends for a birthday weekend at a country estate, hoping for fun and connection. Instead, he feels increasingly alienated as their behavior grows oddly antagonistic. A strange guest, Harry, adds to Pete's paranoia, forcing him to question his friendships and his own perceptions. As tensions boil over, Pete is confronted with uncomfortable truths about his past and the way he relates to others. Blending dark humor with psychological tension, the film examines the fine line between friendship and cruelty, leaving Pete and the audience uncertain about how much of the conflict was real or self-inflicted.
All right. Shall we move on?
Yes, sir.
All right, so this is you got this from Wikipedia, right? Like the genre classification of comedy horror. I had never heard of this label, right? But I think it's apt and I like it. I like this idea. It's horrific, but at the same time, pretty hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, is it different than dark comedy? I guess it just emphasizes the horror more, right, than a dark comedy.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, what is the difference between black comedy or dark comedy and comedy horror? I guess it's I guess it's more extreme, right? More frightening. The horror is more emphasized than the comedy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Tom?
think it depends. It's relative to the individual, isn't it? It depends because comedy is massive. It has to be massively relatable. I'm not given to overthinking, overanalysis, or anxiety. None of these situations seem familiar to me, and I didn't laugh even once. I was just horrified, and I felt my heart a few times, even though there was nothing ostensibly horrifying about it. I mean, there's the moment when Harry's got the axe, obviously, and they're never quite cleared up the goose slaughter as well. I don't know what that was supposed to be.
You're talking about
I guess
the first time we see him.
No, I mean when his friends ditch him and they have to walk to the pub together.
Yeah.
And then Pete ditches him shortly afterwards, finds the
right
slaughtered goose.
Well, there's something surreal about the comedy in a comedy horror film, perhaps, right? Like it's not a conventional dark comedy where everything can be easily explained, even if it's somewhat uncomfortable. Like there are a lot of moments that are just inexplicable. Like what was that? Like where did the slaughtered goose come from? Was it ever explained who for sure. Do we know for sure who was in the car that he woke up and then chased him? There's so many unanswered questions about
Yeah, and
it, which
again, cutting back to like the threatening aspect of local people with the local accent. There was some suggestion sometimes it was Norman, and some suggestion it was Harry. At the end, he found the costume in Harry's rucksack, didn't he? Kind of driving this notion that, you know, the Four or the Pezzos are in some kind of esoteric, mysterious cult who dance around and lock themselves in cars, and we don't know much about them, and we don't want to know much about them. You know, that's what I got from that.
There's an element of menace. How do you
And
like that?
maybe it's connected to the rural
remember
aspect.
the Harold Pinter episode? Harold Pinter and the Comedy of Menace?
Yeah.
No one remembers. It reminds me of that to some extent, right? Like there's this really, it's not just dark comedy that makes you slightly uncomfortable. It's like really disturbing and cannot be explained. And when things can't be explained, that makes them more horrifying in a way, right? Like we want to at least understand people's motivations and what their actions mean. When we can't do that, it makes it more unsettling.
Yeah, and it's exploiting the fear of the unknown in a very subtle way because things are not completely off. They're just a little bit off. The same as Pinter. Social conventions are just slightly skewed, slightly not followed. You don't even have an inkling where it's going. You just have this deeply uneasy feeling. And then the characters all seem to suggest that it's all in your head. You know,
Yeah.
it's all you. You know, it's very, very unsettling unless you're used to those thought processes. In which case, I figure it might be a little funnier, you know?
Maybe, but you know, when you initially started saying that, I thought you were going to say the opposite because it's more of like a triggering movie for the people who do suffer from social anxiety. That's what I find on like Reddit anyway, you know, because if you don't, then you can maybe see Pete as kind of like a snowflake who needs to just get over himself, and you wouldn't. Yeah, can you speak to that?
You kind of jump between the two, don't you? You know, between deep sympathy and then slight disdain, you know, for somebody who's so self-absorbed. Yeah, it's weird. It pulls you around in different directions.
And a second viewing for me, like significantly changed my interpretation of Pete. You know, I liked him a lot more the first time I watched it, and then in
Yeah,
subsequent
that's a good
viewings.
point, actually, Tom. Yeah, because I have only seen it once. You know.
Anyway, yeah, I started noticing like the refugee thing, especially. It became a lot more obnoxious afterwards and like self-important. Whereas the first time, I was like, yeah, you know, good for
Yeah.
you.
But they hadn't seen him since he'd left university, right? Apart
Right,
from, as we find out, Claire.
right.
Isn't that a pretty massive and out there thing to do? Shouldn't they, at first? I mean, that's a social convention, right? If somebody's done something extremely unusual like that, you know, if I go back to England now and I see somebody I haven't seen for a few years, they're kind of obliged to say, "Wow, Russia, what's that like?" And then we dance the dance, right? Oh, you know, it's anything but normal, and then that's out of the way, and then we can focus on whatever they're doing. I don't think that's rude or self-absorbed to expect that. Yeah.
So you're saying the fact that they didn't like have a little chat about it, you mean that's
Yeah.
Yeah, they're completely indifferent. They like aggressively so. They really don't
Yeah.
care. So you could interpret his constant mentioning of it as an attempt to like make a connection with them. It's like, "Hey guys, I mean, don't you want to hear about what I've been doing? Like it's really important to me. You're supposedly my best friends. Don't you care? Aren't you interested?" And they're not. But what I like about it is at the same time it is annoying too because he keeps bringing it up. So it's I think it's good. It's a good sign that we have this ambivalence about him, the main character, and really all the main characters because they're posh assholes and they're annoying in many ways, but they're also at times quite humorous to me. Like Tom K says he didn't laugh at all. There were quite a few moments that I found pretty funny, like maybe with Archie in particular. He was a particularly
Archie's hilarious,
humorous character, and of course Harry, who at the same time I hate him, because I've been fucked with by guys like him, trolls like him, and I know how uncomfortable it is to be in that position. There's one moment like when he's basically hazing Pete in the bath, right?
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. Okay, well,
it's okay. I'm just saying.
Well, it's just you didn't remember this line when I texted it to you. I thought that would get a laugh from you, but after he leaves, Pete says, "Fucking what?" Which is, it's like that line could be used to describe the whole movie. When I post this on Substack, that might be the title of the post. Fucking what?
Yeah.
And to me, that's like very high. That's high praise. That's a compliment. Like if your reaction to a film or a song or a story or a book is fucking what, that's often a good sign for me. It means that I'm like engaged and enjoying it. Fucking what?
Well, I like how this film also kind of challenges your traditional perception of the person who would suffer from anxiety. Considering anxiety as an abstraction for a second, it could be either incidental or coincidental. So eliminating incidental from that, i.e. something terrible happened in your life and now you're anxious, right? Coincidental anxiety, you would imagine somebody, I don't know, who would have obvious physical or mental challenges, right? That's the person you would imagine to be anxious. And there we have Pete, tall, well-built, incredibly handsome, well-spoken, all the advantages going for him in life. And yet he's quite a good physical actor. If I can be a drama buff for a second, that was my major at university. His body language and his behavior, exemplify anxiety. So kind of looking at this guy, and that also fuels the kind of like your belief that it's his friend's fault and not his fault, right? How could this guy possibly be anxious if they weren't torturing him? And that's what it felt like sometimes, by the way, like they were torturing him.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting though, because my first impression of Pete is that he was kind of a nerd and a dork. I didn't see him as the cool guy
at the beginning. Yeah, from the conversation with his girlfriend, right? He comes across as a little bit dorky when he's talking about what did he call himself again? The capo or the
Skippy?
Skippy.
Okay, that was the one bit that made me laugh at the end of that awful parody of him at the end. When he's having his meltdown and going berserk, he says, "I'm Skippy."
Yeah.
Like then I laughed, right? Then I laughed.
That roast is just insane, but again, we can talk about that a little bit later.
All right, well, let's move.
Let's do it.
So you say this image was AI generated? It's pretty impressive. I like that.
Yeah, I like it too.
Comedy horror.
You won't be laughing when you lose your job, Mark. None of us will be.
Okay.
All right.
We've got the cast here. I won't bother to read it all out because we've got some individual slides for this. But viewers, you could pause right here if you wanted to and take it all in. I guess
you could just Google it.
Do you guys find can we be crude and just talk about the attractiveness of the women?
Well, when we get to them, but
fine.
Let's start with Skippy.
Okay, so yeah, Pete, aka Skippy. I've chosen like one delectable quote per character. So
can we take a second to? I don't know if Mark knows just how offensive that word is. I'm genuinely ignorant. Like, do you have gypsies in America, or is this a thing?
Well, I recognized the word from having heard it in Guy Ritchie's Snatch. The Brad Pitt character was called a pikey. Is that not even? Are we not even allowed to vocalize that word?
No.
Is it that bad? Well, I mean, yeah, I know it from Guy Ritchie films, and I think there were like people that would fit that description in The Gentleman, like these nomadic people that travel around in campers and vans. I think ethnically they're Irish. I don't know if that is always the case. Like, is a pikey always Irish or?
No. So there's two, a pikey is the derogatory term for the Irish travellers. And actually, when you in the drop down box, like it's funny, I'm making a university application right now. I had to provide personal information yesterday, and in the racial section, there's white brackets Irish traveller, and then further on down there's Romany gypsy, and then further there's gypsy other. So yeah. It's synonymous with kind of thievery and kind of dirty living, and it's like and actually to come full circle again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but about this, their disdain and mistrust for the lower classes or the classes that are lower than them, it comes full circle in the end, because gypsies, some in the stereotypical notion, people associate them with this esotericism or strange religious practices, or just being a bit out there. And at the end, it all erupts to the surface and he screams, you're not only a pikey, but a pikey cunt. It's also rudest word to call somebody, right? But directly in his address. And it's ironic because he is seemingly, the social Dr. Dolittle, right?
Of course.
Trying to walk with the animals, talk with the animals, and at the end, it's him.
Of course, that's the humor. But remember, they also call him out at one point when he suggests that maybe Harry is like homeless, and they were like, "So what if he was?" So in a way, I don't know if they are that explicitly classist. I mean, they're not ashamed of their social position, which again we'll get into that later. But I don't necessarily see them as being especially snobbish. It's more like they just are in their little bubble and they kind of indulge it. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, do you remember any?
Well, let's consider them one by one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We've got Fig. Actually just watched another film with this actress called The Barbarian, which I can't really endorse, but I think she's attractive, and I think her character in this film it's a cool performance. I like her performance, and I like her attitude. And of course, this is one of the quotes that stood out for me. When Pete's like kind of took a double take when he heard what she said. No, anything. Life's too short to care about anything. What did you guys make of Fig?
Well, let's explain what Pete's interpretation was. This is a really dark image, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't know why this is not clear, but he says, "Oh, so you mean, yeah, you shouldn't care about what other people think, right?" And she says, "No, anything. Life's too short to care about anything." So that, that's when, or one of several instances when we think these friends of his are unhinged as well, like that.
Yeah,
it's not just on Skippy Pete. He's got some crazy associates.
Let's draw a distinction between the performance and the character, because it was very well acted.
Yeah.
And I have to concede that. And I use the word concede because this was my least favorite character.
Okay.
By a long way. I think there's a point of nihilism where it becomes aggressive and damaging to those around you. And I think she reached and breached that point, and it starts, I mean, something's up when Pete first gets there. Like, can we talk openly about the plot? We're not going through this chronologically, right?
We are
I
going
do the
to.
slideshow.
We are going
Oh,
to.
we are, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
That's
But
why.
you know something
Yeah.
tough but she has a lot of disdain for Pete, and if she doesn't, then she's just even worse as a person, you know. But that first warning on the staircase,
Oh yeah, that's
Pete's going
crazy.
to
That's
bed,
crazy. Yeah.
is just awful.
And
As
we're
if
gonna talk about
you know,
that.
as if he's a KPI in a business meeting. You know?
Yeah, that was crazy condescending.
But in fairness, she's pretty hot.
Yeah.
All right, here's her husband, whom she married for his property, right? George.
Yeah.
Well,
Is
I don't
someone
know if
going to
that's really
read it?
fair to Fig either.
Should we take turns?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, well, I can't do it with the proper accent. Tom K, this is you.
But look, he's very, very posh. Look, don't freak out. Let's just keep the weekend light, yeah?
Very
Yeah?
nice.
Yeah?
Very breathy. The yeah, as the mono word tag question is supposed to be, you know, reaching out to the youth of today. That actually this yeah thing, specifically yeah, not yes. As I was leaving London, that had replaced all tag questions, both positive or negative, regardless of semantics. So putting that yeah at the end was regarded as pretty cool, yeah? Listen, yeah? You know what you're doing, yeah? Yeah, but ridiculous. Highlights his poshness, for sure.
See, to me, he's the least sympathetic character. Maybe that's just because I was somewhat attracted to Fig, but I think this guy is like the worst.
Why is
Archie,
that?
well, we'll get to Archie in a minute. He's
I love
redeeming because
Archie. I love Archie.
he's so hilarious. But George, I mean, he's the ultimate posh cunt, isn't he? Like pretending to be like so moved that he wants that Pete wants him to be his best man, and then he like goes and reveals all his secrets, and then they're blaming it on him,
He does
like
come across as
the easy betrayal.
disingenuous. Yeah.
Pretty off-putting.
But in the beginning, he's kind of like he's providing some relief for us as the viewer because he's kind of the kindest to Pete. You know, he's like the most willing
And
to.
I don't know if you guys picked up on this because I don't think anything about this film is an exercise in reality. Okay, I'll say that to begin with. So it's a suspend your reality kind of film. On the same par as Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but in the mental way, not in the physical way, right? You completely suspend your reality. But there's a moment of fantastically real acting between him and Pete in the pub. After Pete does a bump of coke, these two have a moment where they're talking against the wall.
Right.
Very, very real, very reminiscent of an actual coked up conversation.
Yeah.
And probably the number one acting moment in the film for me. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. They connect. And it comes across on screen.
Yeah.
All right, so
okay, let's go on.
So which of these two, they're a couple after all, which of these two do you find more despicable, Tomek? Sorry, Devon Rainman. George or Fig?
I don't have any issue. I don't have any issues with either of them.
Okay.
I guess whoever is more behind. I think the roast was particularly cruel. So if George was like the helm for that roast, then maybe. But I mean, he did offer. He's hosting the party at his house, and I don't have major issues.
Yeah,
with
so
either
they
of them.
can roast him.
Anyway,
it's not an act of generosity.
I don't have major issues.
Generosity.
I think the bigger question is just like the collective friendship versus him and how the line that we'll come to later, whether this is his own paranoia or whether they're assholes. For me, that's like the question we have to explore.
All right, which leads us to Claire.
Mark, why don't you?
I'll read her line.
Yeah.
I'm just a stupid posh girl painting portraits of other posh people.
Did you feel like, so there was the suicide attempt, which is like tied up to her character, but also it's like I didn't quite understand why she asks him at one point, why she asks Pete, like, did you tell Sonia about us or something? Like, but it sounded to me, it felt like there was a bigger issue than just them dating. Like maybe she'd had an abortion or something. Like, I don't know, did you get that kind of vibe? Like something had happened between them that was a heightened level of, scandal or taboo or something. Or we can ignore that.
Well, I didn't pick up on that. I don't know, but I think they're all just fucking with him, and so she's in on it too, and she's playing her role. She's sympathizing with him in her fake way, just like all the others are. And since they had this, physical connection, they hooked up or whatever, she has a way of getting at him that the others don't.
So it's interesting because I feel like you're already kind of revealing your cards, Mark, as far as like where you stand.
If you say they're fucking with him, then why do they keep giving him warnings? They keep telling him that there's surprises to come. And
they're leading it. I mean, if we're assuming that they are fucking with him throughout, and I'm not gonna like endorse that 100%, but let's just assume they are, then the surprise is just a way of leading him on, right? Like he keeps thinking, oh, it's really gonna be a great surprise. They're my friends. They're gonna honor me as the birthday boy. It's gonna be fantastic. I'm gonna realize at the end of all this that it's just a big joke and they really love me. So I think that's part of the trickery and the betrayal, right?
Or it's planting more fear because you're starting to wonder, well, they've already fucked with me to this extent. Like, what's the next scary thing that's coming? So,
Claire, the interesting thing for me about Claire was there was a couple of things in connection to Harry. First of all, like, I'm sorry to be crass. Can I say something crass?
Please do.
Please.
The question that was running through my mind was actually, who does Harry want to fuck, Claire or Pete? Because the way that he kept looking at Pete, I didn't know if it was jealousy or lust. And the fact that he walked in on him in the bath was extremely, extremely unusual. And that crosses any kind of like male banter boundaries. You can't do that to someone that you only just met, drunk or not, right?
We'll get into that.
But they're walking together, and he just stovepipes this phrase in. That Claire, she's a bit weird, eh? She looks like the strongly suicidal type or something like that. And I don't know. And then one of the few realistic bits of the film, I guess, was finding out that he'd been like sleeping with her just before he left, to the refugee camp. But you find out about the suicide attempt first, just before you left, it was, So I don't know if that's something, if Pete's more at fault for her fragile state or what. I didn't get any dark vibes off her at all, and I didn't think she was fucking with him. There was a very surreal conversation just before Sonia arrived. Very surreal. I don't know if she was trying to get with him or not.
But she gets angry with him, right? I mean, in that one conversation where initially she's comforting him and he's kind of like confessing to her and she say, "PT, we all love you," like, and so you're getting that relief again. But then she turns on him and she's
so it's not sincere. I mean, she's in on it, right? She's part of she's playing her role as the allegedly sympathetic.
Then you're committing to some kind of like. I mean, do you think it's? So if they are fucking with him, do you think it's like a conspiratorial fucking with him, or that's just their nature to fuck with him, right? So, do you know what I'm saying? Like, do you actually?
I actually have a completely different opinion than you guys, but I guess we're not giving our overall.
We are definitely are when it comes to it, and I'm not committing to that they're fucking with him at all.
All right. Well, let's I mean, I don't want to interrupt. Tom
No,
K, if you got
we'll
something to
definitely get
say.
into that. We're gonna get into all this.
Okay.
And
All
I
right.
feel
Well,
like,
then let's finish with the cast. All
I feel
right.
like the whole podcast is gonna be me saying we're gonna get into that.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, great line.
What?
Sonia's line here is like maybe the most memorable line of the film, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
encapsulating
That's what left me with the strongly surrealism take.
yeah.
The last line of the whole film, you know? And again, it actually helps a little bit to look back and think, all right, don't take any of this seriously. Not because it was a joke, but because it would just never happen. A conversation like that, the way things pan out like that, I think you would have to be some kind of serious sociopath.
So you're kind of taking the joke to be like a meta comment on the film itself in a way.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
I
interesting.
definitely, yeah. Like she's not only talking to Pete, but to the audience as well, which I love. I think that's fantastic. Sonya's my favorite character by far. Like
She's
she's
definitely chaotic.
Yeah, there was some. Should we talk about the cinematography for a second? Because just when you're at your lowest ebb in the film, and there's all kinds of disjointed, horrible, anxiety-ridden cinematography going on up until then. Sometimes it's dark, sometimes it's some weird music playing. There's this, that, and the other, and there's a horrible conversation. It's supposed to be comforting between Claire and Pete, and you're feeling kind of your heart beating. You're thinking, "Oh, don't kiss her, please, for fuck's sake!" And you don't know what happened to Sonia, right? Then there's this really, really written on the wall, plain angelic cinematography where she comes in with the light behind her
Mm-hmm.
and she lights up the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it brings relief just
Yes,
when you need it the
absolutely.
most.
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering, like, thinking, I don't know much about anxiety, but I know that people who suffer with serious anxiety tend to do a lot better when they have their anchor around with them, right?
For
And
sure,
suddenly
bro.
he is like this version of himself that had been mentioned before, but you've never seen it.
Yeah.
He'd been snuffled by Harry up until that point, and suddenly he's himself. And Harry, i.e., the dark part of his personality, is stifled and negative, and Archie goes off on a tangent as well. And yeah, she's a ray of sunlight at this
Absolutely. And
point.
I definitely think that those, like, especially when I've had my most anxious times, I mean, yeah, I'm always reaching for that kind of girlfriend savior figure, and I've had I've had a few of them. So, and I think that not only
shout out
Sonia,
to Sujong.
exactly. I don't know if she was as much as I don't know if she played the savior as well as like other as well as others, but
No, that she you forced her into that role. She wasn't like a natural. But wait, who are we talking about here? Sonia or Claire? I'm
Sonia,
confused.
we're talking about
Sonia.
Sonia. But I would say, I
Okay.
wanted to add actually that Claire starts to play that role too a little bit in that conversation that Tom just alluded to, right? So both of those kind of like soft female characters that are like less inclined to hardcore bantering, they're creating these environments that are like banter free and where Pete can calm down. So I think that it's
Yeah, but I mean, it's dark with Claire because you get the feeling that she has a design on that.
yeah.
You guys think it's to fuck with him. I think it's because she wants to get with him. And when she starts stroking his hand, for example, it just worsens things for the viewer. And then,
Well, and it's also very bizarre how we see her breasts, right? That's like
Yes, I was gonna say,
breast,
and
one breast.
and
one breast.
and why does he go into her room just to check on her to make sure she didn't hang herself as he hallucinated, or
Yeah, yeah.
is he like experiencing sexual temptation? Again, it's ambiguous, and that's one of the things that's effective and powerful about this film. Like, we don't know how to take it, and you can interpret it many different ways. But I just had a thought about Sonya, just despite what I'm saying about her being my favorite character, and I'm agreeing with you guys that she is angelic and she's the savior and all that. At the same time, is she in on the joke? Is she part of the conspiracy to
There's
fuck
no
with him?
conspiracy. Anyway, there's no conspiracy.
Okay, so
but we can argue it later.
all right.
I would just
Then
say
let's-
that I think the
Yeah.
viewer, our heart is really broken in this last scene in a way, right? Because it's like we think that he's finally found his safe place again. He's in the car. She said, "Of course I'll marry you." And again, it's like, whew. But then she turns. And so you realize that his state of anxiety, there's no relief for it. It's going to just keep going.
Yeah.
So
There will
that's
be no
that
relief.
really devastating ending.
I didn't, Tom. I didn't even get that relief when she said, "Of course I'll marry you." I
Really?
got no smile, no relief at all. No, because she did that horrible build-up to it.
And she's sitting there. Yeah, she's sitting there letting him cry almost in the car after all he's been through the day before. She's still like fucking with him. So yeah, that's pretty rough.
This is so interesting. It sounds like we have completely different interpretations. I thought it was joyous. Like the ending, the last line, I think it's like it ends optimistically and hopefully.
But she's making him feel ashamed with this line,
I didn't get that. Maybe I need to watch again and like observe his facial
No, but I was
expressions.
in the car with Pete. When she says you need to look, you can't take a fucking joke. All I'm doing is looking at Sonia and thinking, well, you can't make a fucking joke. Learn how to read a room. And if you can't, don't be with this man because you're just going to torture him. And again, like I thought about, I was disappointed, very, very disappointed by that ending with Sonia because I thought she's different than everyone else. And then I realized at the end, no, she's not. And she's not for Pete. And I never thought that Pete had the problem. I thought it was everybody else's problem.
Wait, but I thought so. You're subscribing to the everybody's fucking with him.
See?
No. I don't think everyone's fucking with him. I have a different opinion, actually.
All right. Good. A third way. That's even better. But again, I want us to save it.
I think that they're callous and just very much uncaring and inconsiderate with their jokes, and they ought to be more considerate.
Okay.
Whether they're bantering with him. Also, about the parody, for example, I don't think that his friends meant it to be like that. I think the conversation where Pete threatened Harry wildly exacerbated the level of humor in that parody. I think he wound Harry up, and he had been winding Harry up for the whole weekend. So Harry finally snapped and said, "You know what? Do this, that, and the other. Go this far. Make that joke."
Yeah.
I just think they ought to have been more considerate with Pete, Sonia included.
Absolutely.
I think that's a basic universal standard of consideration. If somebody is suffering to that level, don't fuck with them. Don't make a joke.
Of course, I think that's yeah. I agree with that. But whether
you two are making me feel like a bad person.
Well, you said yourself you didn't like the troll aspect.
I'm morally reprehensible. I don't know. Let's get through the cast of characters first, okay? We've got quite a few slides. All right, here's our main man, Harry, aka Plank. You should have given us his other name, his alias, or maybe his real name. Also, aka the Wild Card. Did you all catch that? Like apparently they had like a ritual. They would go to a local pub and then just find some random person and bring him home and see what he or she, probably he in most cases, would do, right? Like they amuse themselves with the pezzos. So, but the Wild Card is like a standard theatrical device. I'm thinking of the Theater of the Oppressed. What's the Brazilian
I know
theorist's name?
Paolo or something. I thought
Not
maybe.
Paulo Freire. That's the educational guy. That's
okay.
Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, Paulo somebody. You know, the Theater of the Oppressed. I think that's the name of that book and the theory. But there's a character that's like the wild card, the Joker, right? So it's kind of like a Brechtian epic theater device. Like the wild card is kind of outside of the main dramatic action, and he's there to comment on what's happening and to interact with the audience and to like take the piss out of everyone and everything in a way. So
in a way, right?
that phrase certainly seemed appropriate. Like he's the wild card, not only in relation to this ritual that they have, but like in terms of the film too, and dramatically.
And interestingly, I actually read that you could interpret Pete's presence at this particular birthday party as like he has become the wild card himself, you know? Like he's become their wild card ultimately.
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, you could think of if we're looking at it mythologically, he's like the god that ultimately, or he's like the sacrificial lamb, as it were, if there's some kind of ritual aspect to this. You know, how the sacrificial animal is like, or the scapegoat, right, is both honored and revered, and at the same time, you know, murdered, basically.
Yeah,
Sacrificed.
Simon in Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. Let's keep going. Devon's answer to Rain Man, baby. This is a great
Norman.
Sketch. Tom, why don't you comment on this initial scene with Norman? How did you like this scene? Have you met guys like this?
Have you guys ever seen a dark comedy series, critically acclaimed comedy series called League of Gentlemen? Not the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, League of Gentlemen.
No.
I strongly recommend perhaps a future pod on that one day. You guys should watch a couple episodes because it gave me those vibes. You know, just a very eccentric local character, you know, and then there was that calamitous comedy point, you know, where for the first time in the whole film, something seemed to be going right for Pete. And you know what I really loved as well, actually, now I think back on it, when Pete says something strange happened today, I need to tell you a story. Did you guys think he was going to tell about the car and the dog?
Yes.
The dancer and
yeah.
Yeah. And then he tells about Norman instead, which seems like, I don't know how you interpreted it. It seemed like an act of cowardice. And then Norman's behind him and he gets punished for the cowardice, right? So not only does he run away from an attacker and he knows that he should stay and do something for that dog, right? But then he's ashamed of it and he fails to tell anyone about it. And then it comes full circle when instead he chooses to take the piss out of an old man who makes a couple of old manny jokes. And he turns around and is confronted with his bad decision. You know?
Norman's response is hilarious. I'll leave you to your impressions.
You know, I haven't spent that amount of decades smoking that I could do Norman's voice. You know, I need to damage my voice box a little bit more. You want to have a crack, Tom?
Nah, man. I have too much anxiety right now. Okay, let's keep going.
Archie.
Archibald.
Yeah.
Favorite. I love Archie so much. He's like a
very
puppy.
Tom is frozen for me. Is he frozen for you, Mark?
Let me go back to that screen. Yeah.
Okay, hopefully there he is. Okay.
Hello?
Still frozen, but okay.
Hello,
there
guys.
we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Well, Tom, why don't you tell us why you love him?
Just the if each character is a part of your personality, then Archie is the one that's a bit naughty but essentially nice. You know, he's like a puppy who's weed on the floor and just can't calm down. You know, and you try to reprimand him, but you can't. And then he's very, very real. He breaks character, and they have that heartwarming conversation. You know, where they're patting each other on the back, and then at the very end, again, you look back and you realize, you know, Archie was kind of building up the roast, wasn't he, by saying, "Yeah, he knows too much about you." But the strange thing is, this is not specifically about Archie, but Archie is upset because he considers that Pete undermined his idea, right, to connect people in the extreme sporting world.
For a weenish
But
good time.
yeah, whatever the hell that means. But until that point, I think twice Pete had mentioned the refugee camp twice, and twice he'd been either mocked or ignored. So seemingly, it's okay for them to mock what's important to Pete, but when Pete undermines something that Archie has in his mind, you know, he's crestfallen about it. And then it because Archie, he's obviously got some problems with substance abuse, and he gets overexcited about things. And you know, Pete finds him after an all-nighter, and after their conversation, you look back and you think, is that what got under his skin? Did he just take too much coke and stay up all night listening to music, or did he get upset that he wanted Pete's approval about something, and he felt like Pete just pulled the rug out from under him?
I'm glad you brought up the all-nighter, though, because that's one of those things that changed on my second viewing. So, like, when Pete asks him, was it worth it? That was a really dick thing to say. And, like, I didn't realize that the first time. But, of course, that's such an asshole thing to say, like, after you've just, you know what I mean? It's so kind of...
Yeah, but my first impression of that was Pete is looking at his old life and questioning. And he's almost looking for Archie to say, yeah, it was. So he could have some kind of validation to go and do the same things again. But deep down, he knows it wasn't. But yeah, Archie reacts in a very negative way to that, doesn't he?
And with a kind of condescension, right? It's like, oh, I've outgrown all of that.
Yeah,
Pete,
that's not me anymore. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
But wait, what was the word you used? I wasn't able to. What?
I believe it was
Fiendish.
How do you spell that? I wasn't able to fiend that word.
I wasn't either.
I'm not even sure I properly heard it.
That's why I thought maybe at some point they're just inventing words for the film, because there were a couple words that I texted Tom today, and I said I love words like this and this, and he said he didn't know either of them, and I thought, oh, Tom would know this stuff. And then I googled them and I couldn't find anything.
Do you think that's supposed to reflect the ridiculousness of doing certain things past a certain age? Like, they're all clearly in their early to mid 30s, and you know, like when you're young, you can get away with using weird new slang words for drugs and having fun and stuff like that. And by the time you get to your mid 30s, it just sounds ridiculous, right? Perhaps he just made a couple of ridiculous sounding words, like calling coke room.
Right.
Rinse.
But what's the word again? Windish?
Weendish. Weendish. Weendish.
Weendish. Okay.
A weenish time.
Never heard of it. I've never heard of it. I don't know if you looked in Urban Dictionary, Tom.
I looked in Urban Dictionary, couldn't find anything, and couldn't even find anything in a Google search. Like, so, it also could be maybe just the fact that, you know, it's making fun of the kind of words that are used in posh language and how some of the words sound silly. You know, like I know whenever I'm around my posh family, I always roll my eyes a few times with like the words that they use. You know.
What words do they use, Tom?
Well, I'm trying to remember. One was like they used one to describe, I don't know, just words like Orientals or something like the coloreds, something like that, you know.
most of my family are Cockneys, and there's still like my dad dropped the accent, but he still keeps some words in there. Like he'll never say the word sleep. He'll always use a noun phrase, and he'll always say have a kip. It doesn't matter about the length of the sleep, whether it's a nap or not.
Yeah.
Did you have a kip last night, Tom?
Or a fag for a cigarette. I don't know. That seems kind of
That's
old.
still quite. That's still very much in common nomenclature, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even I know that one.
I know you know it, but like to use it now feels a bit dated. I don't know.
I still hear it.
Okay.
Weendish. That's classic.
Archie seems more real because he's struggling with something. And because this film is so unrealistic, you're grasping desperately at any straws of reality, aren't you? So there's these moments where he seemingly cracks a little bit. He's just so tired and he drops things, and then he goes hunting and shoots everything out the sky perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, like,
oh, it was loaded.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say. Before that, he's engaged in some unsafe gunplay, not realizing that the shotgun is loaded.
I think he's interested.
And then when he realizes that, it's like, oh, it was loaded after all. That could have gone off the rails, but oh well.
Yeah, I was going to say he's kind of like a unique socioeconomic class as well, because he's like rich but kind of quote unquote uneducated. So that's like a.
He's got the poshest accent by a country mile, pardon the pun. And I really thought, and I think any Englishman would have made the same mistake. The first 30 minutes of the film, I thought it was his house. Well, it must be, judging by his accent. There's posh, and then there's received pronunciation, and then there's raw. And he was the only raw out of everybody. The luxurious exuberance of extending consonants at the end of every word. We don't have to hurry. We don't have to busy ourselves with consonants. There's people to do that for us. You know?
Yeah.
There's like, and there's an interesting parallel here in how they pronounce the word off, because at that level of poshness, you would say off instead of off. And there's only one other substrata of the class system that pronounce it like that, which is pretty much the bottom rung of the ladder in Cockney. So if you watch Steptoe and Son, they'll never say bugger off. They'll say bugger off. Yeah, it's just an interesting parallel there. So I thought Archie was the homeowner. You know?
Yeah. All right. So now we're finally in the stills section of the pod, where I've just picked out what I consider to be key moments and triggering moments, whatever you want to call them. So we can spend as much or as little time on each of these plot points as you guys like, okay? So, but yeah, what did you make of this scene? Like, what did you think was going on in the back seat? Because if on one hand it seems like he's interrupting that guy's sleep, but on the other hand, there's like banging techno music coming out of that car. So it was kind of hard. So then I thought maybe it's like he's having sex with someone. I don't even know. It was very weird. What did you think?
Can I go on a tangent a second? Can I tell a story not about the movie?
Go for it, bro.
It strongly put me in mind of this.
We'll cut it in post. I'm just fucking with you.
All right. So a couple of my mates lived out in a village called Rackenford, which is not too far from Tiverton, and they had nothing to do with teenagers, so they would like trespass and just get into any mischief they could, right? And one day, I won't say the name of the farmer or the farm, still an active farm today. They were trespassing across this farmer's fields, and they found a car in the middle of the field with the keys in the ignition. It was covered in mud. There were donut marks in the field everywhere. So they went into the car, and spread out across the passenger seat were hypodermic syringes, vials of adrenaline, and a bunch of pornography that had like things circled and scribbled on it. There were belts and stuff like that in there. So what the fuck this farmer had been doing. Sorry, live viewers, I really am sorry. But what this guy had
Fucking
been
what?
doing, I don't know what they've been doing, and like strange things happen out in the sticks of Devon. They do, you know, whether they're trying to shed a light on that or not.
So
I
at
don't
first
know.
you were trying to like deny that these exotic fetishized representations of the working class, and now you're confirming them to be true.
No, they're not the working class. They're the farmers. A
Okay.
distinct. Yeah, men get lonely out there, Tom.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
hear you.
I
I
could
hear
tell
you.
far worse stories than that, by the way, but I won't, considering this is going out live. But yeah, I mean, it put me in mind of that. Yeah.
Mark, what did you make of this scene?
Well, I had the same thought. Like this, of the two incidents that occurred before he arrived at the manor, right? This seemed to me to be more worthy of narration, right? Like this is the real experience, not the little exchange he had with Norman. I mean, that's interesting too, but if you're going to tell a story, like why would you not tell this? He's clearly hiding something. I think Tom is right that, you know, he feels shame for not having stayed to help the dog, right? He ran away, and so the Mr. Refugee Camp doesn't look so good if he has to explain that he abandoned this dog that was chained up.
Was the dog really in so much duress? Because I didn't really understand that.
It was screaming like a human, like yelping like a human, and
Yeah.
you know
Okay.
you hear that again, don't you? But what you didn't quite understand whether that was part of his dream that he had about Claire, or whether the dog actually had got in the house. I didn't quite get that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
But yeah, it
good
was
point.
screaming like a human and felt compelled to
Yeah.
go and look. But then when he
Sounded
saw that
like he was in his
the dog
death
was just
throes.
yeah, yeah.
All right, let's move on. This is just a shot of Cleve Hill Manor, very impressive
Tom,
property.
is that the real name of that house?
That's what they called it. I don't remember where I got that, but I'm pretty sure I'm not making it
Is
up.
by any chance, because by coincidence I was reading something. There's a grand manor house somewhere in Devon called Chatsworth House, which has been active since the 16th century. And by coincidence, the day that I watched this film, I was looking at a picture of the owner having a nap in the lower limb of his library, and it looks startlingly similar to this place. You know, so it might just be Cleve Hill Manor. I was just curious whether it was
Yeah,
actually something else. I don't know.
yeah. All right, we can keep going, Mark, unless you wanted to comment on it. Okay, so we have this opening wait scene, which is beautifully anticlimactic because you've got the Darude Sandstorm track, which he enters the manor playing this like iconic techno song, right? Just ready to party, and it's just hilarious how quickly that adrenaline that he's coming in with is deflated.
Setting up the tone for the weekend, thinking that he's going to relive his youth.
Right.
And really, it all
Did
just
you
falls out of it.
did the excuse that the friends provided, did it seem plausible?
No,
No, not at
no.
all.
No? What note? And would he really have come in, sat down, and started drinking if he found their cars there but nothing else? Wouldn't he have gone looking for a note? I mean, he does say when they come, I couldn't get any signal. But then later on in the film, he does get signal to call Sonia when he goes outside. Wouldn't he have walked around the edge of the property trying to get signal?
It's definitely, yeah. It's it's planting the seed obviously in the viewer's mind, but I don't think it's like, there's enough doubt, I think, that we we're willing to maybe give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit, right? And so, I mean, would you agree with that? Like,
I didn't.
What do you mean? So you immediately just think that these people are assholes?
Yeah, that was my impression from the beginning. I mean, uh, no text and okay, he didn't have a signal but we know that he was texting Sonya later, so or was it George that said he didn't have a signal?
Either way, there was an
No,
excuse that was made,
Pete,
right?
Pete said he didn't have signal.
Yeah,
And
so it's not plausible to me.
when they do make their entrance, that's not a movie entrance. That's a stage entrance. And they come and take these very pronounced positions around him, almost like a family frame photograph.
Hmm.
And then the dialogue immediately is stilted and stagey. So it seemed to me. These are all classically trained actors. They've all been on screen before. They know how to act in a film, right? They know how to be real. There's nothing to chance here.
Sure. So again, I just have to comment on like the excellent use of music here. I love. First of all, I just have a soft spot for electronic music, so I just like it. I like hearing it in movies, but just like the kind of banging drums and percussion that comes in with this, and the way that her arms are stretched out, like she's his hype man, like, and he's kind of like bouncing as well. So I just thought it was like a just aesthetically dope entrance. So,
You're talking about Harry and Fig for those that are not watching.
Yes, sorry.
And they're like looking like from Harry's final scene. Sorry, I'm back a little bit. But he kind of kisses the goose as well.
Yeah.
And there's a throwback to that in the final scene. There's things about kissing animals. There's a lot of things with animals here. Do you think there was some kind of insult from the director, Tom, about lonely Devonshire men, shall we say?
I don't know, but yeah, I was reading some stuff online that I think that there is maybe some symbolism going on. So
there's a vibe there,
Well, not only does he kiss the goose, he fillets the goose's bill. Basically, he deep throats the goose's head almost, or maybe I misremember that, but it seemed really pretty.
It's weird,
shocking, and explicit and extreme, and weird. Yes.
But we obviously
speaking of weird, here we are in the bathroom.
Yeah, and speaking of birds as well, because now we're on to another breed of birds, being the cock. Just a really interesting scene again, because it's one of those scenes where, I mean, Tom has already said like this is just out of bounds, and obviously they have to push the boundary of what's acceptable, like what we're willing to kind of grant as banter, but regardless, Pete does seem like you could argue that Pete is maybe a little bit oversensitive. Like initially he's like really quick to like cover his junk where he didn't really maybe need to,
There's the idea, I suppose. I'm playing devil's advocate here because I'm against Harry from start to finish, right?
Sure.
But I suppose it's okay to have boundaries, but you are responsible for setting those. And Pete could have just said right from the offset, "Whoa, what are you doing? I'm naked. You're naked. I'm not comfortable with it." Like he could have set that boundary himself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Harry would have fucked with him about that, but
yeah. I guess like right from the offset, there's some pressure on Pete, isn't there, to be something more than what he's actually being? Because at the beginning, Harry comes in and they say, he says, "Oh, I've heard that you're the funny guy."
Right. You're the
as if
funniest
Pete is
guy.
a big exuberant character and
Right.
Harry's kind of out funnying him,
Right.
So maybe he feels under duress to just roll with things, but he can't roll with things.
Yeah, and I think that the question now of like who was Pete is starting to like come more and more to the forefront of our mind. Like, was he a party guy who's changed into this kind of more inhibited, anxious guy, or as other characters will allude to, has he always actually just been super anxious and he's managed to just kind of reinvent his past in his own mind, you know? Mark, anything else? I like the way that the tap there was like a cock, just in case you wanted to look at that scene again.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, see how it's kind
Oh,
of like...
I see. Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. Mark, why don't you... You're a little bit quiet, so why don't you jump in and... what did you think of this?
I was just thinking, I mean, as you guys were talking, I was thinking about the British sitcom Peep Show. Have you all seen that?
My all-time favorite sitcom.
Oh,
All-time.
okay. So, Pete, in a way, reminds me of Mark.
Mark Corrigan.
That nerdy, dorky quality. You know, like what's the phrase that he and Jez use? El Dude. The El Dude Club or whatever. Yeah. I mean, that Pete is kind of like that, right? Like the name Skippy reminds me for some reason of the El Dude label, which is so corny and ridiculous, you know?
Yeah.
So I just thought this was a great scene, you know? Just
this unsettled me again deeply. And it's weird because the film, it doesn't really have a horror visage, does it? It's not, I mean, you grow out of horror by the time you're 14, 15 years old. It ceases to be scary, right? And then you see something like this, which for some reason really gets under your skin.
That's why I love it. Because I think the old horror tropes, they wouldn't be as effective for people that are older. But this kind of shows that horror can still, you know, really work for different age groups and so on.
I think maybe because for our age now, we're accruing worth in various metrics, right? And one of the biggest ones, whether we admit it or not, is reputation.
Absolutely.
Which strongly is predicated on appearance as well. What should I be? Should I be the party animal? And I'm with my friends now, 3 buttons undone. He keeps on changing, doesn't he? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then he, you know, seemingly he fails again and buttons himself all the way up to the top and walks out. You know, little scene, but it really gets under your skin, doesn't it?
It's a really smart scene. And then, of course, immediately afterwards, he's completely cut down to size, right? With Archie saying, make an effort. And it's like...
Yeah.
And so it's like all that work was just...
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was all for null.
I was watching this, by the way, I watched this with my wife, and she really hates horror, and I told her it was a dark comedy, because you told me it was a dark comedy, Tom.
Yeah.
And we had to split this into 2 segments. So we watched an hour of it, and then we decided to have a drink to watch the last 25 minutes of it, which was a smart move. You know, because it helps settle the nerves a little bit. But,
so what did she make of it? Because it's such an English film in many ways.
Yeah, she was disturbed for sure. I think the main point of anxiety for her was that she didn't want Pete to get back with Claire, right? If Anya watching this in the future, sorry Anya, if that's the wrong impression. But that's the impression I got. You know, but again, a lot of this stuff was class-based and nuance-based, based on, it's specifically Devonshire based as well. So maybe we didn't look at it through the same eyes. You know, she maybe looked at it through more neutral eyes, whereas I had perhaps a little more disdain for the gentrified classes of Devon.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, if you have anything else about this, or
No, I just looked up the phrase the L Dude Brothers.
Uh,
That's what the Skippy moniker reminds me of. So any fans of Peep Show out there will know what we're talking about. The
didn't you
rest of
guys
you,
did you guys get the Skippy thing? Did you have Skippy in America when you were growing up? No? Skippy was is a series about a kangaroo who was it was a real kangaroo, by the way. It wasn't animated. The kangaroo who lived in Australia, obviously, and was friends with this boy, and who always led the boy to, I don't know, some mine shaft where a guy had fallen in, and like he can manage to communicate with the boy, and he somehow always saves the day. It's a series called Skippy the Bush Kangaroo, which is why, and it had this really stupid theme tune as well. You can look it up, but there was a kind of side reference to that. I thought.
I I just love.
I was
how,
thinking of Skippy peanut butter.
Yeah,
You
that's
know about that, right, Tomek?
I do. Yeah, although I'm allergic to
Yeah.
peanut butter, but yeah, I just love the way that at the end they're like, "Well, what is the Skippy thing?"
Yeah, but they do that in some ways as well. Like, you guys, are you well read in Urban Walsh?
Fairly.
Yeah, it's the one with the five friends who have varying degrees of success in life. I forget the name now. It's like Carl Ewart and Billy, and they somehow come into contact with Juice Terry, but he's not there. Oh no, yeah, he's one of the main characters, Juice Terry. I think
Is it Glue?
it's not. It is Glue, yeah. Yeah, I think it's Glue. And Billy, the boxer, is one of the perspectives. He's always calling things brutal. And then at the very end of the book, someone says to him, "Oh, there's another thing you used to say back in the day, Billy, brutal." And Billy's like, "Oh, I can't ever remember saying that." And then all the friends like, "Yeah, he never said brutal. But he did say brutal all the time."
Hmm.
It's quite a common device, isn't it? Yeah.
This is just coming. Yeah, speaking of brutal, so we've got these two particularly brutal dismissals aimed at Pete, and I think we've already alluded to both of them. But yeah, I remember the fig. I remember being in the cinema with the fig comment, and Tom, you
What a
referred to
name.
it. It's a nice name, actually. I like it.
That's a posh name, isn't it? That is a posh name. You've either got enough money to have a very long name or a ridiculously short name.
Yeah,
Big is one.
I like it. I like it. It's just
By the
so.
way,
I
I
don't.
cut back to earlier. I think I was wrong then. I guess he didn't button himself all the way up.
Yeah. In the end,
No,
he
he
tried
he eventually decided
to be
not
the
to, right?
savage.
He wanted to be more casual
the
and
wilds.
carefree.
Wilds.
I just want to say I don't give a fig for fig, but there's something she said after this. Just so you know, you're not doing too well. And then he's like, "What?" And then she says, "You've been pretty fucking crap," or something like that.
The only, I guess, caveat. I mean, we could sympathize with her a tiny bit. Is the fact that he claims to have like hooked up with her as a freshman and she denies it. So that would be the only reason she kind of has a right to feel pissed off.
And why would he say that in front of what's the nice guy's name again?
George.
The nice guy.
Oh,
George. Yeah. Yeah. Why would he rub George's face in that?
Maybe just
Not very nice.
Naivety, yeah, that would be the generous reading.
By that age, that's pretty damn naive. Almost as if he'd spent the previous 5 years in a refugee camp or something.
But yeah, I think like Archie's comments, like, for a second we think maybe it is going to be this very elegant dinner party, but then in a second you see George is dressed very casually too. So it ends up being more a joke about Archie, I think, dressing up like this.
yeah. Those just listening, by the way, Archie comes downstairs in a tuxedo, so he's quite overdressed. Yeah. That's before he pulls the all-nighter.
Exactly. All right, so I've skipped
All
ahead
right.
quite a bit here.
The second big treat after the axe wielding maniac chase. The second treat, and Pete might be forgiven for being slightly trepidant about this treat, given the nature of the first treat.
And maybe I shouldn't have skipped ahead about the first treat. I guess the first treat we allude to it in that initial picture of Harry, so we didn't talk about it then. But yeah, so that axe thing, I think that was also like when I was watching the first time. That was when the movie again like raised the stakes a little bit in terms of like insanity levels. I don't know if you would agree with that. Like that was just like
And
absolutely.
again, as if it was all part of the plan. You know?
But
Like
even
when he
so,
got to the
like how could that have been? Could that really have been a
no,
plan,
it
or was
couldn't.
was that
No.
like supposed to be like improvised? Improvised, I guess.
They made out like look, we made it so that Archie chased you with an axe. Well, they couldn't engineer um Pete, and sorry, they couldn't engineer Harry getting under Pete's skin like that. And how could they possibly predict what way Pete would have gone off by himself? I mean, I suppose you could say that Harry followed him, but how could he have ensured then that Pete would have come across the slaughtered goose?
Mark, any
None of
thoughts
it.
on that axe wielding sequence?
I mean, I read it as being part of the plan, but now that you guys are doubting that, I might have some doubts about it too.
And can I just segue? What happens to the bag of coke? Because what we see is Pete doing a bump on the corner of his car. That is not, in any situation, rinsing an entire bag of water.
Absolutely, and that's a very interesting little sequence because yeah, you get this moment where I have to keep like looking up the characters' names, which is just horrible. But anyway, but Art, so you get Harry kind of like taking the blame for it, right? But in a way, then he's got more kind of power over Pete through that, right? So it's like,
But what happened? Had Pete actually gone a bit nuts on it and
ooh,
taken
that's
them
a
off?
good point. That's a good point.
Is this
Yeah.
that was my first thought actually was, is this the first glimpse into the not so pleasant side of Pete?
And to the unreliable narrator, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
good point. So that's a really good point, actually. I didn't think about that, and I think that's very plausible. I mean, like I'm guessing that's very intentional by the.
I mean, like his in the pub, his entire demeanor has changed, right? He's having a really, really well, actually no, because he's talking to Fig quite animatedly before he takes the bump, isn't he? And then he has a deep and meaningful with nice guy.
But he's able to, yeah. When you're on coke, you're not going to be insecure, right? So he's
Yeah.
finally able to like enjoy the feeling of confidence for a little bit. And
But why did he get that confidence before the bump? Because he's talking to Fig, isn't he? Before he's had the bump.
I guess maybe alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why do you guys think I picked this particular still?
Is that that's the guy who did the roast, isn't it, in the background?
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of funny. I didn't notice that until later. Any thoughts, Mark, before we move on? You seem to be pushing those slides.
Well, we're an hour and a half in, so I'm just trying to manage our time. But
fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, that was hard to believe, the reaction to the hunt. That I struggle with that. Like why would they be angry with him? I couldn't understand. Like that was not really. I couldn't.
No less believable to me than practically everything else that had happened up to that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, their ostensible reason is that he didn't shoot anything,
Yeah, but
so he kind of spoiled it, right? Like they, like theoretically, they're planning something that they want him to enjoy, and if he doesn't shoot and kill anything, then how can that be fun?
It just seems so excessive, right? Like, because again, I'm on my more revisionist reading is going to be more saying that the issues is with Pete. But when you have like these really extreme things where it's just, come on, how it's harder to make that argument.
And also, when there is a friend member in the group who suffers from anxiety, particularly crippling social anxiety, you know, part of their worry is that if they don't participate in things that even that everyone else thinks that should be fun, they'll be considered to be some kind of poor or in some way self-serving. And I think again, this is just a kind of nightmare fuel. Pete, you know,
yeah,
like they made this activity for me, and shouldn't it be great? You know, shouldn't I have done something? Shouldn't I have achieved success in that particular metric? And then, no, I didn't. And now everyone hates me.
yeah.
You know, it's warped thinking, but yeah.
But I do think that, again, we have to really be thinking about the unreliable narrator, because in the scenes in the
Can I
car,
ask you to sorry, I didn't
No, it's
exactly
fine.
know what you mean by that. Like, what is the unreliable narrator?
Sure, we're going to come on to it, but the unreliable narrator just means that we shouldn't necessarily be trusting, like, it's mainly told from Pete's point of view, but because it's told from Pete's point of view, we can't really trust that his interpretations of what's going on are objective. They're so subjective, and that penetrates even stuff like cinematography, so that you're getting, these kind of slow shots in the car of George driving with this kind of like confidence or diffidence, but you know that they could easily shoot this differently in a way that it would seem very harmless, like they were just people driving in a car, right? So by shooting something a certain way, in order to project to show us Pete's anxiety, but that's not necessarily like true, right? It's not necessarily. So I think that's but it's a very common device in literature, right, Mark? I mean, I know
The
just
unreliable narrator, yeah, for sure.
Does anything come to mind for you with that particular? I mean, I think just some Edgar Allan Poe we were doing recently, The Telltale Heart, that had an unreliable narrator.
Mm-hmm.
But okay.
Well, with film, it's a bit different because there's not like a voiceover narrating what's happening. We just have these different perspectives. But I agree, like Pete is the de facto protagonist.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like we've already kind of exhausted this particular frame, so I don't mind if we move forward.
Looking at the madman.
Yeah, this was. What did you guys think of this whole, like, the way that she? Because it seems like, right, she moves
she's a mothering figure, isn't she? She's very, very mothering. And actually, it's interesting you say about the unreliable narrator, because now, remember earlier I mentioned about that very obvious cinematography. She comes in bathed in backlight, and swoops in and saves the day. Maybe that's just Pete's perception. And she does appear to be quite a maternal figure, a calming figure, kind of loving and protecting figure. This takes it to a kind of stretches it to a parody extent. Like she's putting him to bed.
All right, here's some hot milk, and
but I mean, don't forget he's been out all day. He's had all these new impressions. He's had cocaine. He's had alcohol. Do you really think that he would then go and have a little nap? I'm not convinced. I think I'd be wired for days after that.
But again, so it's like initially, I think we see her as very, very positive, very positive. Then she has that chat outside with Archie, which is not with Archie. I'm sorry, with Harry, and we're kind of like,
Harry,
what's going on there? And then, by calling him Madman, she's starting to turn a little bit. I think like her loyalty. We want, in some way, our heart wants her to be constantly loyal to Pete, but we see her kind of getting maybe seduced by the group's interpretation of Pete. So that so that she's no
Can I just
longer.
say about this slide, about the fading image on the right hand side? I mentioned about his physicality earlier because he's a very, very well built person, and you see the kind of stooped shoulders,
Yeah,
like sloped shoulders, head going forwards.
right.
There was a lot of things. I don't know if you guys noticed a little tick under his left eye, a lot of touching the neck. When he was kind of making a concession. When people were putting him in his place.
Mm,
A lot of head cocking, like it's a sign of uncertainty.
mm,
Yeah, he portrayed that very well. It's difficult for a big person to do that,
mm.
so shout out to him.
Shout out. Okay.
Fake Pete.
Yeah. What are you guys trying to say? That I have no personality? Oh man.
Yeah.
The roast as a genre does make me uncomfortable. Like, I don't know.
You have to sign up for it. Then it's okay. We see them all the time on the internet, don't we?
Yeah.
You see people who are offered, 5 minutes on a very famous, well-watched comedy show to do what they want, and in exchange they get roasted afterwards, or not. They succeed. It's a Colosseum-esque lion pit of comedy,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to sign up for it. Otherwise, it's abuse. And I can't get on board with the idea, even of a light roast. Why would you do that to somebody on their birthday? So from a clear antagonist as well. He went round and had conversations with several of his friends beforehand over the course of the weekend, telling them that Harry made him uncomfortable, and he thought that Harry wasn't who he said he was. And at the end, they let him create some roast.
And the constant scribbling in the notebook, just hilarious.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned that yet.
Yeah. Oh man. You have to be very thick-skinned, I think, to handle a roast. Like I'm so thin-skinned, and I've basically found like lots of ways to protect myself so that like I don't actually deal with anxiety much anymore, because I just found ways to like avoid it. But I would like stuff like at my language school in the summer, we would get reviewed in Exeter. We would get reviewed every week by the students. So we'd give them a comment card to fill out every week too. That's pretty intense, And they would rate, and we all had each student had 2 teachers assigned for the whole week, right? So one person was their main teacher, and the other person was like their second teacher. And so in these like scorecards, they would give you a score like you're between 1 to 5, and your second teacher is between 1 to 5, and it was just really, I just hated it, And so I just remember being so like strict about taking these papers and like delivering them upside down to the office and just making sure like I wouldn't look at them. That was like my way of protecting myself. Even though in theory I'm supposed to look at them to like think about how I can be a better teacher. Like I was confident enough as a teacher that I knew I didn't really, like I was
as if that's the way to improve. Figure out what's going to make the students like
exactly.
you more.
That's
That'll
stupid
make
too.
you
That's insane
a
as
more
well.
effective educator.
Agree.
Yeah.
So that's insane as well.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You can't make a horse drink by telling it how bad it is, or by telling it how thirsty it is. Mark, you mentioned earlier like Pete's show. There was a lot of very good situational based comedy there. I don't know if you recall the episode where he was engaged to Sophie still, and they went to marriage counselling, and the counsellor said, "Don't you want to talk about the other thing, Sophie?" And as Sophie mentioned about Mark's premature ejaculation.
Yeah,
And
that sounds familiar.
It had only been 56. There had only been 4 minutes. There had 56 minutes remaining, and Mark turns white as a sheet and stands up and says, "Well, this has been nice." And then she says, "Mark, there's 56 minutes remaining." And then of course it jumps to his internal monologue. Great, another 56 minutes to hear about how awful I am in bed, and I'll be paying £50 for the privilege. I suppose you do have to be thick-skinned, but where's the line that you draw? You know, and as I said earlier, Pete hasn't invited any of this. Quite the opposite. He's seemingly in crisis.
Yeah.
It's another thing. I don't think this film was too messagey and trying to make too much of a social comment. But it's obvious that Pete's in crisis some way or another.
He is in crisis, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll talk a little bit more about what I saw from the director and writer in interviews. So,
I mean, what happens when someone's in crisis and then you continue to attack them from all sides? They will eventually go into a state of berserk.
which he does,
No.
right? He throws the vase. Yeah. I think that's our next our next show.
Goodness.
Do you think anyone that hasn't seen this is able to follow our conversation? I'm worried about that.
Well, we can make it for people who've seen the film, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I see it. That's how I perceived it anyway when I was planning it. Like
Okay.
it's something I would enjoy if I had seen the film. So this
Right.
was so. I just wondered if this really happened. I mean, I guess it happened, right? But like, because this is the last thing we see right before the car, and it's like we don't know like how bad. Like, was like, did he go to the hospital? You know, like what did you?
You get the glimpse really for the first time about what fuels this anxiety. I mean, we spoke earlier a bit about coincidental and incidental anxiety. You start to feel, okay, is this incidental then? Is there something that really torments him and causes him to have a low opinion of himself? Just guilt of what he did. And it's a pretty shitty thing that him and his friend did, right?
Yeah.
And again, for the people who haven't seen this, Pete and his friend, he reveals at the end after this roast, he thinks that what they're driving at by the roast is the fact that he and his friend caused a mentally impaired young lady to commit suicide. But Pete and his friend can I say this, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pete and his friend would call this girl and make dog barking noises down the phone because she was afraid of dogs. And eventually this girl, in her anguish, went to the bathroom, put a bag over her head, committed suicide. And during the roast, there's a girl who comes on to the stage, the makeshift stage, with a plastic bag over her head. And Harry is barking loudly like a dog. What was the excuse? By the way, it turned out that none of this was real. That it wasn't, they weren't driving at that at all. There was an excuse for everything.
Right.
So they said.
Yeah, but I mean, what about the bag over the head? What was the reason for that again? The real reason?
I can't remember. I'd almost need to like revisit the script again.
About the dog, it turned out that Harry was what was the name of this guy? Plank, yeah?
Yeah.
And they had dared Plank to French kiss a dog, which he'd done. And there was also some semi-plausible reason for the bag over the head. You know?
Yeah, I almost like want to just look at the script a tiny bit there.
Nightmarish.
Yeah. Okay.
We need some script reading music.
Sorry, I got lost. I started looking this up. Okay. Are we moving on? I'm not gonna try and So
Look at that face.
yeah, it took me a few times to really grab that shot from the film. But
yeah, he's on the edge, isn't he? Right on the edge.
And she's this it's pretty fucked, right? I mean, come on.
It's that Sonia's face is far more disturbing. She can't be oblivious. Nobody's that focused on driving, right? She's on a B road in the countryside.
Oh, and she's winding him up right here. No, I mean she does the whole joke here about like right? She continued like because he's like, "You wouldn't marry me," and she's like, "No, I wouldn't." So this is just her in the middle of another bit of banter. It's
About something as serious as marriage.
almost like, and again, we'll talk about it more later. But I would just say, some people just exist for the majority of their social time in that performance space of banter. So that just becomes life. Life becomes, and if you don't want to exist in that completely different mental space, then it's like it's your fault. Because why don't,
Can I talk without wanting to offend anyone about the general behavior of genders and gender differences? I don't want to open a worm can here, but you kind of, it tends to be more men who exist in that space in England. That's been my experience growing up,
sure,
right?
sure.
I'm one of three brothers. My dad was one of three brothers. My granddad was one of three brothers, and they all come from North London. And it was just a cauldron of piss taking. That was how we grew up. All the girls in our family did not do that. And no one ever wound them up either. Now, I don't know if that experience is unique to me, but I didn't meet that many women growing up also who bantered like that. So again, you kind of feel like you should be a little bit more able to be yourself, around a woman,
Yeah,
around the
absolutely.
woman that you love, and
Well, that's the
possibly
thing.
loves you
Yeah,
as well, enough to marry you, right?
of course.
But I mean, she already gave a hint of this because Claire's not like that, is she? Big is, but Claire's not. I don't know if Pete is just holding her on a pedestal, but yeah, I mean, Sonia comes and then she starts bantering and she winds up Harry and she winds up what's his name, Archie, but Archie doesn't show it straight away.
Right,
So she's obviously able to banter.
right. And she's
I
northern, which
wanted
is
to,
another stereotype, right? That northerners can hang a little bit
yeah,
in that
did
sense.
you guys get, by the way, I wanted to ask again, it was a cultural reference. Tom, you might know this, but why, like, did you get the joke that Archie was making before Claire wound him up?
The
So
Jimmy Savile
Archie,
stuff,
yeah, yeah. Do you guys know who Jimmy Savile was?
50-50.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
he comes up with that wig and the guitar and the little not guitar, sorry, cigar and the little sunglasses and the voice as well. It's unmistakably Jimmy Savile. And she uses this amazing comedic device. She says that's completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
And then there's a horrible silence. That was clearly a Mancunian accent, whereas Jimmy Savile was from Leeds,
Right,
right?
right,
Right.
right.
Yeah. Archie then, when he's in the throes of his anguish upstairs in the bed, he's probably said the funniest line. If I had found the film funnier, I would have laughed a lot more at this. He says, "I'm just a horrible toff."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so she's obviously capable of rolling with the punches and dishing them out.
Hmm. And I
Mhm.
have found many like English women, especially, who can banter still, also quite well.
And Irish.
Yeah, and Irish, absolutely.
Oh, that's not banter, that's crack.
Yes,
That's the crack.
that is the crack.
I just had a random comment or
Please.
question, I guess. Have either of you seen the Martin Scorsese film After Hours?
No.
I was reminded of that as I watched this. I mean, similarly, there's one character who experiences all of these crazy, slightly menacing things over the course of a night. And then he wakes up in his office, like he finds himself in front of his computer at work the next day after he's been his entire body, he's in a body cast. I can't remember how it happens, but that's just one of the absurd things that he experiences during this night of menace. And he ends up in front of his computer in a body cast, and the screen says, "Good morning, Tom," or whatever his name is. it that final line reminds me of the which is ambiguous. What are we to make of that? It reminds me of the way this film ends too, and so you you don't know what's happened. You have that fucking what reaction, and you don't quite know how to feel about the protagonist, right? Like maybe you sympathize with him on some level, but at the same time you see how he kind of brings it on himself. So
And the
that's
notion of perpetual suffering as well.
yeah,
It just goes
yeah.
on and on.
It's like never ending.
Like
That's
Patrick Bateman.
Yes. Thank you for helping me finish my thought. It's like that's the whole film. It's just a string of abuses, and it's like an endurance test. Like how much can one person take?
Yeah. Before they throw a base,
it never really lets up. And when it finally does, when the film ends, you don't know how to interpret it. Like in the case of After Hours, what happens? He's in a body cast. He's somehow delivered into his chair. I don't remember how, but like, what does someone come free him from that? Or
would you recommend that film?
Is he just stuck there? Yeah, it's a really interesting. I mean, this is Scorsese, right? Like it's a I don't know if it's a comedy horror film, but I think it's probably described as like an absurdist, surrealist comedy. But this is the guy who made Goodfellas, so it's not really something you would expect from him. But I do recommend it. I think it's if you like this, you might like that.
Nice. All right, let's get into some of the main talking points. I think we're going to transition now into some other slides. So this is a funny image of the classic "What's Up" blue checks, and in an interview that I saw with this co-writing team, they're both named Tom, and we'll feature them on a subsequent slide. They said that the feeling of the whole film that they want to capture was the emotion a person feels when they've sent a text on WhatsApp and it's been read, but hasn't been responded to, and the anxiety that can produce. And I thought that was funny. So just that they would be able to like pinpoint that particular emotion. And also, just speaking of that, like I changed my WhatsApp features so that I don't see that, right? So
yes, and others don't see whether you have read their messages.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't know. Do you also do that?
I have. I recently did that just because it seems to prevent some unnecessary drama. Although it could also, on the other hand, it could like cause some drama because someone might have the question, well, why did you do that?
Yeah, but for sure. But I can deflect that pretty easily and just be like, look, I mean, we're allowed to have some control, right? It's about control ultimately. Like this is such an invasive feature from WhatsApp, I would say, to like force you to engage, and pressure you to use the program, really, because then you don't want to be seen as an asshole. Tom, any thoughts on the fact that these guys said this?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't want to lord it over anyone with just many men, many minds, but I never thought about it before. Honestly, it doesn't matter at all to me. Like I just respond whenever I want. Maybe I'm the selfish one. Maybe I'm the asshole.
No, that's healthy, man, and that's I wouldn't even say it's like healthy, or I would just say it's different, right? Because it's just more of like I would say I just have a more obsessive personality generally, so it's like it could.
I think if I saw that someone had read and ignored it, I'd probably feel relieved that there would be no more imminent communication in the future.
And I think it particularly affects like the dating age, you know, because like so
Okay.
thank God, like I'm not in
Yeah.
that. Like when you've texted a girl and you're not sure how she feels about you.
Right. Okay. I see. I made a point of that back when I was dating, which is a long time ago now, and hopefully it will never be again. But yeah, I kept texting to an absolute minimum. Would just never respond, and only have a phone call. You know,
Yeah.
I would see the texting as coming later. You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a generational gap now. You know, I guess this really does cause people a lot of
Exactly.
upset.
And I think that's what it's also speaking to, is that this kind of stuff causes our youths quite a lot of stress in different ways, whether it's like counting the number of likes or whatever, right?
Yeah, there's a
whole
backlash against that. I've noticed on social media now you can remove the function that publicly displays how many likes something has. So now it just says it just says people liked this, and it won't show the number or the exact people.
Yeah, or YouTube,
You know?
for example, YouTube taking off the dislike feature, right? So
the thumbs down.
the thumbs down count.
Yeah.
So that was like
Yeah.
But this stuff is our world now, you know. A lot of this is our world. There's these kind of digits and numbers and yeah.
Yes, I've measured out my life in coffee spoons.
Hey, there's the man who requested Proofrock. I think,
yeah.
You know, Mark, that Tom has requested at least, I think, like 3 of our episodes. I don't know if you knew that, but just
Proofrock and what else?
The dark British film about what was the name of that film? I have the worst memory.
I've forgotten now.
This Is England?
Aiden recommended This Is England. And then very shortly afterwards, we did another film about the dude. It was like a dude with guns.
Same director?
Maybe.
The Revenge film.
Tom,
you should know this, man, because it's
your choice. What was the plot? And I'll tell you the name.
It was like
there was an elder brother who had
spastic
Dead Man's Shoes.
Yes,
Dead Man's Shoes. There you go. Yeah.
So that was a Tom request as well.
Was that your recommendation?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great one. And what was the other? What's the third? Or is there a third?
I don't know. Maybe there may not be a third.
The one that really piqued my interest was Proofrock. Yeah. But I mean, I listened to practically all of your pods, and the ones that have entertained me the most as a listener have actually been the topical discussions, because you guys pontificate very well, especially when you're bouncing off each other. The one that surprised me, I didn't think I would like at all, and was probably my favorite, was just talking about mobile phones and the influence in society. That was really, really interesting. Yeah.
But you contributed to the Faulty Towers episode too, right?
That was your request as well. Actually,
yeah.
I think. No, Mark.
No, I picked it, but
Tom had a really cool story with his dad.
A personal experience. Yeah, your dad introduced you to those back episodes. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. We were in France. We were on holiday in France.
Yeah.
And it was pissing it down outside. Pardon my French. Then we just found a bunch of like VHS videos and loaded them up, and it turned out to be Faulty Towers, and watching it like that.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
Okay.
All right.
Class guilt.
Tom, why don't you take this one? I hope you're not tired yet, and talk for as little or as much as you want about the role of class in this film as the Brit. Class is. I'm going to do one of these annoying things where, like, I pass a question over to you and then I end up talking a little bit. That's what actually one of my favorite podcasts. That guy's always doing this thing, and it really annoys me. So I'm going to do it. So yeah, I want to say before you take the question that I always am like emphasizing to like my wife or to other people like how major an issue class is in British society compared to the States. People kind of like are quick to like define their class. They kind of know where they stand. The speech is such a revealing factor in your class.
But there's less pride as you move up. like I first of all, there is still a distinct lower class, but they wouldn't call themselves lower class, right? But
Hmm.
it's obvious to see. But there's a lower class, a working class, a middle class, an upper middle class, just upper class, and then I suppose I wouldn't even know what to call it. What are they called? The aristocrats,
Hmm.
right? I nearly said aristocrats then. Thank you, Walt. Yeah, these guys are comprised mostly of upper middle to upper class people. Obviously, there's a guy who's the lord of the manor,
Right.
the the typical wet flannel, the weak chinned. That's like the stereotype, right? Claire is a bit. I mean, you want me to talk in stereotypes? Um, I don't believe in this or endorse this, but Claire is pretty in a kind of horsey way, which again, uh, either no chin or long chin with big teeth would be the how we view the upper classes, right?
Yeah.
And she has that kind of ethereal, long-necked, far-away beauty thing going on.
Hmm.
Yeah, does class exist? When in Tiverton, I went to Tiverton High School, local comprehensive school, and there's a mix of working class and middle class kids. I don't speak with a Devonshire accent. I speak with a general Southern accent.
Right.
People would put me in the middle class bracket. Um, there was a very, very prestigious public school on the edge of my town called Blundell School.
I know people that work
Incredibly,
there.
yeah.
Several.
It's actually a high-profile criminal case which was concluded last year, and my aunt was the judge on that
Wow. I
case.
actually
Yeah.
applied to work there anyway. I
Wow.
think that would be a good job for people like us if we wanted to because you could teach TEFL there as well, because they have a lot of
You
foreign
could. They
students.
got very high intake from China and Singapore, I
Exactly. So I
think.
was like, how can I get a job? And anyway, that's enough of that. Go on.
But anyway, I mean, those guys are the kind of raw guys in the town, right?
Mm.
So yeah, there is some bitterness. There's something about the North-South divide as well. I know you've spoken about that a lot to varying degrees on various podcasts, and I don't want to get like too much into that. But yeah, because he's come back and he's started saying, did he say class or bust instead of class or bust? Something like that. And they were mocking him a little bit over that,
Mm.
you know. Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? I forget now because I'm a bit when it comes to phonics, I'm a little bit out of kilter with the exact terminology. But for example, in Devon, you could say class or you could say class. And what's that? You can't have open and closed vowels, can you? You can have open and closed consonants. I'm not sure what it is when you go up. What I heard was there was the great vowel shift in medieval times, which pretty much stopped around the Midlands of England and around that latitude of Europe. So the way that Northerners pronounce things is still much more similar to English pronunciation as it was in those medieval times
Mm.
than it was otherwise, right? But yeah, class in Devon, yeah, I would say it's an issue for some people, but it's not like an overwhelming thing.
Mm.
People live okay, but they're a bit deprived. Like in Civvy High School, for example, we were sharing textbooks. There was definitely not enough equipment to go around. Yeah.
Mark, you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
You just turned your camera off for a sec, yeah?
Hi.
You can keep going. I was just saying, I feel my energy is starting to wane a tiny bit.
Yeah.
So let's keep going because there are some
Yeah.
stuff that I really think we can still have a quick chat about. I don't know about this. Just we already talked about it. Unless anybody wants to say something about this, it's pretty funny. That's all. It is funny and that's the thing. Yeah, on the second viewing, again, as I said, it did seem more ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Cringy.
So yeah, I put this slide in just because, again, I think how we end up judging both Pete and his friends like comes down somewhat to our own personalities, but also to our culture. So maybe that's kind of too obvious anyway. So unless anybody wants to speak about that, let's just keep going. We've discussed the idea of unreliable narrators, so we can also keep going.
All right, explain this.
I don't know. I was just thinking how we're quick to use this like both ands comment a lot. So, for example, in a second,
let's explain. Let's explain. My one of my catchphrases is, "It's not either or, it's both and." And in this slide, Tomek has put an X over both and he has replaced it with
neither nor.
Okay, so what's up with this?
Yeah, this is just like, first of all, I think we're just using the whole both and to such a degree, and I'm also starting to hear it more in like the podcast stratosphere. So I kind of want like what initially sounded like a cool phrase to me, and like I was enjoying it. Now I'm like ready. I want us to like evolve. So, but also I was thinking like how, you know, we're often quick to refer to this whole like I contain multitudes, both and, and I love it, and it's like I think it's a very useful lens to look at stuff. But what about neither nor? Like what role can that play? So can you skip to the next slide and then we can come back to this? Because I think the next slide is going to be about, yeah, okay. So this is obviously like the central question in the film, the line between joke and cruelty, between banter and bullying. So we can either say it's both and, or we could say, I don't know, I'm just wondering if in those same questions that we say they're both and, couldn't we just like also reject both possibilities and say like the fact that it is both kind of excludes it being both, if that makes sense, right? Like you can't be both sometimes. So actually it's null. I don't know. I have to flesh it out a bit more.
People change, you know, like people go away and they don't see people for years. And when you come back to a friend group, there's an element of testing the water first. It's called being a considerate human being. You know, they come charging in with this crazy banter. Like, remember, he was complicit in the wild card tradition that they used to have. And he actually says at one point, I thought that was cruel.
Yeah.
You know, they can't just come charging back in like that unless they were an amazingly inconsiderate bunch of friends. They can't just leave their friend hanging in a cold house for 5 hours while they're off drinking down the pub unless they're a bunch of extremely inconsiderate friends. For me, if you're choosing either banter or bullying, it's bullying throughout. 100%.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I'm just looking at it in too much of a realistic way.
We interrupt this podcast for some shameless self-promotion. My book, Earnest Games, considers this very question, the line between joke and cruelty, the question of whether something is in earnest or is a game. I think it applies to this film too, if we're considering this question. Are the so-called friends of Pete Skippy, aka Skippy, are they in earnest or are they playing a game with him?
You know, I was watching a pod recently about this topic, and the guy was hypothesizing that banter has a kind of crucial role in survival drills in groups of not just men, but any people who work in jobs that can become dangerous or high stress environments. So when a new person enters a tight knit group, people will throw pointed barbs at them to see how they react. They'll simulate a stressful environment and see if they can accept it, or even better, turn it around and throw it back. To be creative in times of stress and crisis, to keep your head. You know, so there's an evolutionary perspective to this as well.
Yeah,
But we are
yeah.
highly evolved beings and nuanced beings now with too much time on our hands and not enough pressing matters of survival on our hands, aka time to overthink. So such pointed barbs then can really cut your legs out from under you if you're not in the right headspace for it.
And sometimes, I mean, I don't want to make this about me, Tom, but you did mention early on, like, me deciding to pull out of that banter group was like a really big decision for me, like mentally, and I don't regret it for a bit. Like, and it's not because I think it was toxic or anything. All I'm trying to say is like, it weakened. Actually, being in the banter group weakened me, So now I feel stronger, and so all I'm saying is like your example
But
of like,
if you were ever curious about that song, then I mean, I consider myself to be a very level-headed person, and I even spoke to other members of the group, and it wasn't banter. I know the exact night you're talking about. People lost their tempers and started directly insulting each other. It's not cool either.
agreed, but in general, like I would just say that anyway. Yeah, I mean, I think that your point about like its evolutionary purpose is fair, but I would just say it's also a sign of strength to like kind of not like, because you know what I mean, like participating is also like, I often am a loner in work situations, because I just prefer. I'm just saying sometimes it takes strength to avoid the group of banter because you have to like be ready to take on shit by yourself. And you,
There's some rules to this. Like I worked for 4 years. I worked in a very 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 traditional pub in Tiverton, a backstreet boozer, a proper a terrace house with a little sign outside. Called the Racehorse, still open in Tiverton, Wellbrook Street, if anyone's interested. Anyway, that had very distinct characters and faces and all of these very, very nuanced pub rules. And there are some general rules to this banter as well. Like, first of all, in most cases, if you're not an asshole, you never hit someone where it hurts. If there's something obvious about somebody, you don't hit them where it hurts. Secondly, if they're not having it, you leave them alone. You can pick up on that more or less straight away. I think a great example of a piece of pub banter. This is one that always sticks in my mind when I think about banter, right? There's a guy called Brian. He was leaving the pub and he picks up his coat and got it stuck on a low bar stool. No, so not a bar stool, just a low stool which was surrounding the table. And he finally got it free. And then the other side of his coat got stuck. And as he walked away, he pulled the stool over. And somebody shouted from the crowd, "Don't forget your stool, Brian." And everyone started laughing, right? And it was really, really, really funny. And that's the thing about banter, right? So you don't hit someone where it hurts, but it's something novel or new. For example, if a guy came out wearing, I don't know, like Bill Burr did a great bit of comedy about this recently. Have you seen this thing about, even a guy who makes a smart decision, like he takes an umbrella out when it's raining, and his friends shout to him, "Hey, look at this guy, he's got a fucking umbrella."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, would you pull that out of your ass or something?
Right.
So it's anything novel or non-traditional or anything that paints you in a more sensitive light, but nothing nasty. And there's a caveat to this as well. If you have the ability to beat up the surrounding people around you, i.e. you're at the top of the dominance hierarchy, then you may transcend the rules of banter and hit people precisely where it hurts. If you're irresponsible, right?
I
You're
would
a
just
nice
say
guy.
that you've defined it in a very noble way, which I think like in reality, banter is a lot more cruel a lot of times, but
Depends on the friend group as well, doesn't it?
sure. But I'm just
A
saying,
bunch of lads about the town who are apt to fight or to get into situations. Yeah, it's going to be a lot cooler, especially if someone comes into their stratosphere who clearly doesn't belong there, then they're going to find themselves a butt of a joke very quickly.
Yeah. Mark, any thoughts on this?
I mean, if we're relating this question to the film, which I guess we are.
Yeah, you should bring it back to that.
Yeah, I mean, I just marveled at his tolerance. I'm talking about Pete's tolerance for it. I mean, I would have left like much sooner. I would have said, fuck all of you, and then just taken off. Like you guys are supposedly my best friends from college or whatever. I mean, I don't know what's happened, but I think I've outgrown this, or we've just like lost the connection that we once had. So thanks, but no thanks. I'm going home.
I hear you. All I'm
I would
saying
have
is,
I would have just bailed on him, like that, or at least as I was watching this, I was thinking, oh, they've gone too far now. Like, I'm out.
I hear you. All I'm saying is that as I watched it a third time, I was seeing, oh, at that moment when they're bantering him, he easily could have bantered back. It's like an invitation to play a game that he's not participating in, and the banter is actually can be like quite affectionate. And the affection comes from the reciprocation. So,
Yeah,
but every time he tries that, every time he tries to play along, they undercut him and attack him. It's like
maybe, but sometimes he's just too
that's
sensitive.
what I felt. That's what I felt.
I felt
well, give us an example of his hypersensitivity.
Okay, so like when Harry comes in and he says like you're supposed to be the funniest guy on the planet, and he just doesn't say anything back. Like he just like freezes. Whereas if he was in a bit more,
I'll give you another example. When somebody, I can't remember who, said to him, yeah, it was the nice guy. I can never remember his name. What's the nice guy's name again?
George,
right?
Yeah, see, to me, George is the biggest asshole. But okay,
well, that's why it's funny that we've dubbed him the nice guy.
Yeah, he's now the nice guy.
George says that but the nice guy, I mean it as an insult, really. Like I should say the guy who doesn't have any courage, right? So, George says to him, "Oh, you making up for those years when you're a reprobate, were you?" In regards to him joining a refugee camp. Now, if he was bantering according to the rules of banter, which, by the way, means not being true to yourself, he would have rolled with it. But he feels some sense of honor, like he's honor bound to himself to do himself justice now. He doesn't want to just agree with that. And he says, and he makes the screw face as well. He says, no, also that I'm quite passionate about it.
Exactly.
Now,
that's annoying.
That breaks the banter cycle.
Yes.
It breaks the cycle and it ostracizes people from the group because they're not following those tropes.
Exactly. And the whole point of banter, as it was explained to me, is like in English society is to cut down on pride, people having pride, so that everyone's kind of at this level playing field where we're trying to deflate our false ego. So that would be like, again, maybe an idealized way to look at banter, but nobody's supposed to feel like they're better than others. I don't know.
I may have shared this story before, but the Irish author Roddy Doyle, who is, somewhat famous, like one of his novels they made a movie out of. I want to say it's called The Replacements. It's about like these Irish kids that form a soul or R&B band, and they kind of hit the big time in Ireland, and there was a movie about it, right? So he's kind of well known around Dublin, and so he was at some event giving a lecture or a reading or something, and he said some young Irish kid approached him and said, "Oh, hey, you're Roddy Doyle, right?" And he's like, yeah, I am. He's like, "Who fucking cares?" And then he ran away, So that's like, a similar
exactly
dynamic.
And I think,
right, if anyone gets too big for his britches, he's gonna.
And that's when they become obnoxious. Like, I don't know, like Joe Rogan. Not to be a hater, but like I feel like he's reaching this level now where I just feel like he's kind of not able to take the banter as well, or he's just getting. I just feel like he's become more proud, and it's like off-putting, Like I don't know. I'm very suspicious of fame, and like, are you able to get famous and rich and still maintain your like everyman quality? Anyway, shall we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I can't be here for too much longer now because I've left Evelina for
100%, bro. 100%. I think it's
about
okay. This
3
is
hours.
yeah, and I didn't expect to go this long either. So, really quick, this is a very this is a distillation of the types of comments I read on Reddit about the film, and I'll just maybe pick a couple quotes to read out. So, first one, I think this is a very like American response to me, especially because I think the whole idea of gaslighting stemmed from America. But it says I kind of got the sense that the whole movie was about being gaslighted. At least that's how I felt the whole. Like those people who make jokes, but they're always mean, and then they tell you, "Oh, you can't take a joke. You're so sensitive," as opposed to acknowledging that they did something wrong. And-
Narcissism, isn't it?
Pardon? No, this one I would say is not narcissism. It's like the defense. It's
No,
like,
no, no, no. I'm saying like what the idea that they're highlighting is narcissism. You know, it's like winding somebody up to an unacceptable degree and then saying, like turning it around on them.
like claiming that they're being narcissistic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so this person's finally. So I don't think the takeaway was that he was just an overly sensitive guy. Second statement.
Yeah, so in other words, there was a conspiracy to fuck with him.
But again,
Okay.
I'm seeing that as a very American response. And again, that's not, and I'm not saying that in a dickhead way. Though. I'm just saying, for me, it's a bit more American. We can talk about
I'm
that.
the
though.
dirty Yank. Here
Exactly.
it comes.
You are. Thank you. Next one is a similar take. Unless we are being massively deceived, they are all awful to him seemingly for no reason. In fact, he ends up being the random, and this is what I stole from earlier, I told you guys, that they bring into the group just like in college, and he gets the brunt of all their uppity treatment.
The wild card.
Yeah, and they refer to the fact the breakfast thing is like a perfect example. That is pretty good example, right? He like on his birthday, he doesn't get served any breakfast, and he just gets left like a couple sausages. Like if you're really caring about him, you would have given him a better breakfast. Okay, and here's the other take. This person, I think, is an American. He's saying, I watched it with 2 English ex-students, and here's what they thought. Pete is an asshole. His friends hate him. He's blown them off and acts as if he's superior. He's actually a bad person, as he reveals in his refugee comments, when I finally got the refugee child to understand. His classist treatment of Harry, his presumptuous treatment of Claire, his utter impatience and petulance for the get-go, and finally his reveal about what he did as a 15-year-old. Sonia hates him as well. She's tired of him acting like a hero for having a fiancée from Yorkshire. So
could this be a both and moment?
It could be, yeah.
Or is it a neither nor? I think that's to circle back to that. It's like a distinction without a difference. Doesn't that sound smart, that phrase? Like what benefit do we get from saying, oh, it's neither nor as opposed to both and? Isn't that basically the same thing as opposed to either or?
But I'm just thinking maybe neither nor is saying, well, actually, he's not a sensitive asshole. I mean, he's not a sensitive narcissist, and they are not just bantering. Isn't that the most logical conclusion, really? Like, in some way?
Are we telling our opinions about the film now?
Yeah, okay.
I think so.
Let's just get into that. Yeah, we're 3 hours in, so.
No, I mean, it just
don't
seems
exaggerate. It's only 2.5.
Okay, my bad. It's just because we had 40 minutes of technical difficulties, so it seems like it.
Yeah, which we live streamed to the world.
Perfect. Go on, Tom. Sorry.
You know what? I feel like I've trodden water pretty well up until this point, and now you're both going to think I'm a dickhead. But I have a I usually have quite conventional opinions about films, but because when you are in some anxious state, and whether you suffer from definable anxiety or not, everyone gets into anxious states sometimes, right?
I've seen you in them.
And you have these, you live out like these dialogues that you have with your friends. And sometimes you do think, all my friends hate me. And those dialogues are wildly exacerbated, highly unrealistic, and never ever come anywhere close to fruition because people aren't like that.
Yeah.
Even assholes aren't like that. Even assholes know how to pretend to be good, right? This is an entire film set up with a grotesque parody of friendship, according to the insecurities and suspicions of one man. And in my view, what he does is he drives up to a random Airbnb. He sits there, wrapped up in blankets, drinking for a couple of days. None of that stuff ever happens. Nothing. None of his friends come and meet him. None of them speak to him. He hasn't spoken to them in years. He had signal. If he went outside, he would have called them. He would have said something to Harry about obviously pointedly looking at him and writing in his notebook. Nobody would ever walk in naked. The man in the bar. Nobody could orchestrate such a huge coincidence with the walk and the act chase. Nobody would ever react like that to being unable to shoot a bird at the hunt. None of it happened. It's all exploration, the grotesque parody. And I think he has this psychotic moment, and Sonia comes up and picks him up from the Airbnb, from the dark room where he's just been drinking all weekend. And on the way back, maybe she's a bit disappointed in him.
I had that suspicion. I'm not going to commit to that interpretation completely, but I did have that thought. Like this whole thing is a medically or pharmacologically induced hallucination. I did have that thought, that suspicion, but I'm not 100% committed to that.
He's in a mental crisis, and nothing is that unrealistic unless surreal things happen.
And so this also relates back to the unreliable narrator notion that we considered. But maybe the unreliable narrator, maybe it's not Pete, but the filmmaker, right? That's the unreliable narrator. So like the whole thing is not to be trusted. So whatever we think about it is, we could easily contradict it and easily undermine that interpretation by pointing to something else. Well, what about this? Well, what about when they said that? Or what about this particular action or scenario or whatever? So again, to me, that's one of the strengths of the film. That's what I like about it. The fact that ultimately there's no one clear interpretation. Everything is ambiguous. I think that makes it more powerful. But again, that's the both and quality, or if you like, the neither nor quality, right? It's all of that or none of that, which is really like the same thing.
By the way, I do think I consider that everything that happened up until he sits on that sofa. I'm a bit unsure about the car scene at the beginning, but I do believe the interaction with Norman was real. I believe Norman was a real character. I just think that when he enters that house represents some kind of prison that he's in his mind, And some of those characters are probably real, parts of his past, and some of them were probably parts of himself that he fears he is.
Only thing I don't like about that,
because they call Harry a tit, don't they? So he's a bit of a tit. And they also said that he's a funny man. Do you think perhaps he worries that he's a bit of a tit when he's messing around like that, being funny? Do you think maybe that he abuses drugs a little bit? Maybe a bit too much? Maybe that's Archie, right? And the coke. And even when they realize that he's not getting coke left, he goes, don't worry, we've got plenty of ket ketamine, right? That, by the way, is a cultural thing about Devon, because ket is huge in Devon. It's a horse tranquilizer, and people steal it from like veterinarian clinics and stuff like that. So
I think it's
what about
compelling. Hold on, I want to go. Sorry, I just want to get it. Just the only thing I don't like about that kind of interpretation is, well, first of all, it's a movie, so like it's allowed to have a lot of artifice, and and the second is it's just too much like the whole "I woke up in a dream, it was all a dream" type thing. I'm not into that kind of. I don't know. I just think it exists and it's a fiction at the same time. Like it exists for us to. I don't know. I just think the power of the film, in a way, is
No,
that
it's not.
we're imagining all these situations as
It's
happening.
not.
Do you think
It's not that he woke up and it was all a dream. The whole thing is a waking dream, where there's no clear distinction between dream and so-called everyday reality.
Yeah, this is his fear of how things would be if he met up with those people.
Maybe.
You know?
I mean, I
I
won't
mean,
go there. I
one way
can't
to
go
see
there.
it would be like, he booked the Airbnb and then he didn't invite anyone. He was too worried, or he cancelled, right? And he just sat there thinking about all the horrific things that could have happened if he hadn't cancelled.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember exactly what happened, but the filmmakers, they said that the inspiration for the film was a wedding that they attended. One of them attended a wedding with people from his past, and it was like that kind of similar vibe. I don't know how. That's not especially illustrative, but anyway. Can we go to the next slide?
Well, can I ask my question
Sure.
of
Sorry.
both of
Yeah.
you? I meant to ask this before, just because I didn't understand why this was so important to this character, and maybe one or both of you have some insight. He seems overly concerned about being called shy. Do you remember this? He's like, "Well, did you, Harry seems to think I'm shy. You didn't tell him I was shy, did you?
Yeah.
Shy? Like shy? Why is that?" I had to like replay that several times. Like, is he saying shy? SHY? Like what? Like that's the worst thing you could be is shy? Is that some British social thing I don't know about? Like is that the ultimate faux pas to be shy?
No, but that's what haunts people with social anxiety, isn't it? That's what haunts them, and the last thing they want is to show that side of themselves because it's in them.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I took.
Well, the only thing I would say is Claire, in one of her conversations with him, just to add to what you're saying, she's like, "You're just a bit anxious, but that's nothing new, right?" So again, it's like, it's clear that way gives more credence to, again, this idea that he's not reliable, that he wasn't this party guy in college, that he's been pretty repressed.
And he's trying to talk himself up to impress Sonya. Is that the idea?
Or he's just deluded himself into, rose-tinted glasses and that whole thing where we do see our past maybe in a way that is overly romantic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's jump into... I don't even really care about this. So
Okay.
let's keep going. I don't know. I just feel
and
like
I think I'm going to have to shoot off in a bit because, as I said, my daughter's been like sitting in the bedroom like Harry Potter at the Dursleys for the last
Can we do 5 minutes?
Yeah, 5
Let's
minutes.
do 5 minutes max. Let's go to the next
Those
slide.
of you not watching, we're passing over the male shame cycle slide, which I think that would be pretty interesting, but we're moving on.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
This is just interesting that both of these guys, they're named Tom, and they write together and they've worked together in the past as the comedy duo Totally Tom. And I think it was even like up for grabs who was going to play Pete. And then Tom ended up taking him on. So there you can see the St. Petersburg equivalent of the Tom and Tom. By the way, Tom just wrote a play for our school and I starred in it. So, we're on the come up as well. All right, let's keep moving.
The other guy wasn't in the film at all, though, was he?
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
I thought this was very important. Again, this is a quote from the director. "We English are very emotionally repressed. We don't really talk about things from the heart, and so we just joke. That's how we make friends, and that can be really nice and sweet, but also it's a fine line into something horrible."
as is being overly expressive and too much in tune with your emotions.
Agreed.
There's a fine
Agreed.
line to anything,
Yeah,
right?
agreed. Americans are often the opposite extreme, unloading a bit too much all at once. And this is just a note about the filmmaker. He's not especially like well known, but yeah, his name is Andrew Gaynord. So I think we've done quite a bit of talking. Thank you guys a lot. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad you guys thought about the film.
Are we just going to act like that surname didn't exist? What kind of,
Well, it's
what
not
kind of a surname? You can edit this out, right? Could you say his surname again?
Gaynord.
Right. I just wanted to check, I heard that right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mark,
Yeah.
do you wanna lead the thank you?
Well, I mean, you mentioned it before, but this is the final episode of season 3 of this podcast venture known as Texting. We've done 20 episodes every year for 3 years, plus a few special emergency editions. So we've probably done 65 to 70 of these altogether. Is that fair to say? So, thanks to everyone who has given a shit and, listened and commented and been one of our guests or otherwise contributed. Tomek and I will discuss what is to come in 2025, the year of the snake. And we're open to any suggestions or feedback you might have. So,
Do you guys ever analyze any mainstream film?
We can do.
Well, the Linklater film is pretty mainstream, right? The
Waking
Life.
No way, bro. Nobody knows that
No?
movie. No. Linklater
No.
has mainstream movies, but Waking Life isn't one.
Okay, well, let's do School of Rock. Let's do Strays. Have you seen that yet?
No.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, Tom,
I want to say thank you for having me on today. It's like just a great honor after watching all of this stuff, just to be doing this with you guys. The time has honestly flown by.
Tom, we hope you'll be back with a little bit better mic as well.
Yeah,
just because
join us again.
I want to hear
anytime.
your beautiful voice. Well,
have you guys not been able to hear me very well?
I can hear you, but just the quality could be better.
It's a bit muffled, but yeah. But yeah, okay. Come back anytime. If you have a particular deviant text that you'd like us to consider, you're welcome to join us again.
Okay. Well, I thank you both very much. I wish you a happy new year.
Happy New Year to you, buddy, and to you, Mark.
I look forward to watching this when it comes out.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay, everyone, remember to subscribe to the Substack. I'm at markwillwright.substack.com. My co-host is at tomekb.substack.com. This has been streaming live on my YouTube channel at markwillwright, WRITE, and eventually we'll edit it and post it to the YouTube channel as well. So thanks again. Any last words for season 3?
You spoke eloquently on the previous slide, and as usual, I would just say that I'm thankful to you, Mark, and I'm hyped to continue in our creative ventures together.
Sounds good. Take care, everyone.